We are a fully fledged division of the Royal Aeronautical Society. A fully fledged division. Although we are independent as an organization in South Africa, we have strong links with the Royal Aeronautical Society in England. So, Aeronautical Society of South Africa was founded in 1911 by Sir John Weston, one of the first aviators in South Africa. It's a volunteer society, and the membership ranges from aerospace professionals, corporate companies, as well as enthusiastic amateurs. So it's not all of us are engineers or technicians or so on, but they are aviation enthusiasts, also members of the Aeronautical Society. On the engineering side, AeSSA, we are AeSSA Voluntary Association, and supporting the professional engineers in their efforts to register, and activities like this one that we present today will be registered at AeSSA for CPD points. So what does the Aeronautical Society do? We provide opportunity to exploit unique sources of inspiration, obviously in the aviation, aerospace discipline. We are independent in the sense that we also influence the course of progress of aviation and technologies related to aviation in South Africa, and demonstrate a commitment to professional development of personnel in aviation and aerospace in South Africa. So we also link South Africa to the rest of the world in aviation, apart from the Royal Aeronautical Society, also the International Council of Aeronautical Sciences, or ICAS, and the International Society of Air-Breathing Engines, AeSSA. Typically during the course of a year, if it's not like this past year and a half, we have events including conferences and also outreaches, especially with the university students, yearly challenges in terms of model aircraft flying, and there are also other lectures in professional development, and we also sometimes link with Air Force and the SAAF Museum, for instance, as events during the course of the year. Now we are trying hard to organize online conference this year. The planned dates are between the 15th of October, which is a Friday, and then again from the 18th to the 21st of October during the course of the week. And we will have the formal announcements regarding that soon on the website, as well as through email, etc. So we encourage everyone that's not yet a member of the Aeronautical Society of South Africa to join, and also to support us in our ventures. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Kat, for the introduction, and I'm really excited to say that this is our biggest online lecture yet. So congratulations, Johan. Your talk is really popular. So just some administration first. if people, when you register, please use the full names to register, especially if you're a professional engineer and you want your participation to be submitted to AeSSA for your CPD points. We can only prove that you were there if we know who you are. And then secondly, when Johan Conradie presents, you can submit questions. There's a tab at the bottom of the screen called Q&A. So please type your questions there, and they will be read out to Johan after the presentation. So it is with great pleasure that I will introduce Johan Conradie. I've come to know him on the WhatsApp forum, the SAAF Talk forum, and I noticed that he was particularly knowledgeable and on the Buccaneers, and he had written books on it, and so I got to know him a bit more, and I've read his books, and I've realized that he had really done something quite amazing in terms of documenting the history of the Buccaneers in the South African Air Force, and he has a particularly unique storytelling style, which is very relatable, and I think that you are going to really enjoy this talk. So just to introduce Johan, he grew up in the small west coast town of Vredenburg, and then later on in Piketberg in the Swartland area, that's in the Cape Province. And he is currently employed in the financial services industry and currently lives in the Strand. He developed a keen interest in aviation, especially South African aircraft, since he was a youngster. Living in Vredenburg, he often saw the South African Air Force aircraft base at the nearby Longebaanberg Air Force Base, flying over his town. He never flew in the aircraft, nor did he do any service in the South African Air Force. In later years, he started to search for more information on the Buccaneers that the Air Force operated, but information and photographs were scarce. On Facebook, he joined the 24 Squadron page, and that page was actually about to be archived by Facebook, and it only had 10 members. He was made an administrator of the group, and that was how his journey really began. Getting more and more foreigners, 24 Squadron people to join, he started spread the message of a possible book on the South African Air Force Buccaneers. In 2012, he was invited to a 24 Squadron gathering in Pretoria, and he met a lot of the former 24 Squadron members. He was made a member of the local Buccaneers Association. The idea of a book was welcomed by all and gathered momentum. With support of the members, the information and photographs started rolling in, and he decided to do the book in a 4-part series. And the last in the series was finalized in April 2021. So it's over to you, Johan, and we are looking forward to your story.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I just want to put up the slide here, and then we can set the ball rolling. Okay. And then, okay. All right. Are all ready? Can I go?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to start off by saying good afternoon to everybody that joined the webinar for this presentation. And thank you very much, Kevin, for the introduction. It is actually a great honor and a privilege for me to be invited to do this presentation on the Buccaneers of the South African Air Force. I mean, this is a subject that's very close to my heart. And hopefully, I will be giving those who attend a little bit of insight into the Buccaneers of the South African Air Force that was operated between 1965 and 1991. So, I mean, that in itself is a long time ago. It's been so much part of my life. I mean, I've been busy for the last 12 years doing research and writing the book series on the 24 Squadron Buccaneers. And the story about the Buccaneer is a long and a good one. I mean, to compile this in an hour-long presentation was quite a challenge for me. And this, you must just take note that this is just a broad overview, because I mean, to tell the real story will take a few days. So if I can start off, a former General Chief of the South African Air Force and the Buccaneer pilot, Lieutenant General Mike Miller, wrote the following in his foreword for the Buccaneer Book 1, and I quote, "It was President Woodrow Wilson who once said, 'Friendship is the only cement that will ever hold the world together.' The Buccaneers certainly created lasting friendships. It is not unique that 60 years after the first flight and 30 years since going out of service, it has kept alive this amazing spirit. Perhaps the answer lies partly because you really had to respect the rigid and unforgiving boundaries of its flight envelope. Stay within, and the Buccaneer was a delight. Go outside, and it will bite." It was, however, not only the flight that was a delight, but also the weapon system and the exhilarating results achieved by the close crew cooperation, the pride and the love for the aircraft shared by the ground crew support team that set the Buccaneer apart from all the other aircraft I had flown. Buccaneer pilots and navigators referred to one another as the pirates, which was very appropriate considering the type name and the aircraft they flew, and the primary task, which was to swoop down on and knock out enemy shipping and ground targets. The Buccaneer is born. The aircraft was initially referred to as the NA-39. The first prototype NA-39 aircraft with the tail number XK486 made its maiden flight on the 30th of April 1958. It was only on the 26th of August 1960 that the name Buccaneer was adopted at Lossiemouth. In the early 1950s, the Soviet Union embarked upon what was to become the most massive build-up of naval power the world has ever witnessed. Included were 24 new heavy cruisers of the Sverdlov type, posing a serious threat to merchant shipping. To design an aircraft to meet the operational requirements set out by the Admiralty in August 1952, and having to operate from the relatively small British carriers was a daunting task. The Royal Navy called for a low-level strike aircraft that could penetrate under radar defenses, stable at high speed with a nuclear and conventional weapons delivery capability, and a good strike range. Only Blackburn came up with a solution, and an aircraft with remarkably streamlined small wings. To give it a stable ride at low speed and high speed, they applied the area rule technology, giving it a Coke bottle shape. It was also fondly called the banana jet. They were very successful because it is doubtful that there has ever been an aircraft that could ride the cobblestones flying at low level better than the Buccaneer. It was just another exciting, smooth ride at very low altitude and about 1100 kilometers per hour. Why South Africa bought the Buccaneer? This is a beautiful picture of Buccaneer 411 flying past the home on Spalding Moor Tower during its maiden flight on February 1965. And the photo credit goes to the BAE historical section. In 1960, the Minister of Defense appointed a team to evaluate the strategic requirements of the South African Defence Force for the next 10 to 15 years. One of the points stressed in the final report was the need to enlarge the combat capability of the South African Air Force. One of the requirements was for a heavily armed long-range naval strike bomber which could evade enemy radar by making low-level attacks. Blackburn soon approached the South African government with a proposal to sell the Buccaneer to South Africa, and the obvious choice was the Blackburn Buccaneer, a large and extremely robust two-seater jet designed to operate from aircraft carriers capable of carrying anti-ship weapons and at low level and high speed to counter any threat from the sea. The recommendation was to purchase 32 Buccaneer aircraft. The final decision, however, was to order 16 to be delivered in 1965, with an option for a further 16 to be delivered at a later stage. On 12 October 1962, the purchase of these big, beautiful aircraft was announced to the press. In the picture here is Buccaneer 412 and Buccaneer 411 in various stages of production at the Blackburn factory in Braff. The SAAF version of the Buccaneer ordered was designated the S Mark 50. It was similar to the British S Mark II, but incorporated a rocket pack to equip it for operating from hot and high airfields like Waterkloof near Pretoria. The SAAF tail numbers allocated to the Buccaneers were number 411 to number 426. The manufacturing of the first Buccaneer 411 started early in 1964. A sword of Damocles hung over the ordered Buccaneers. In 1964, the Labour Party had come to power in Britain, and the new Prime Minister, Mr. Harold Wilson, was determined to enforce the optional United Nations arms embargo against South Africa and wanted to cancel the order. He believed that the Buccaneer might be used to suppress internal insurgency. That was a somewhat illogical reasoning, since there were many South African Air Force aircraft better suited for counterinsurgency roles than the Buccaneer. Following severe pressure from the Republic, he agreed to let South Africa have its Buccaneers, but would not honor the option for 16 more Buccaneers to be delivered at a later stage. Buccaneer 411 made its maiden flight on 9 February 1965. Allocated a civil registration number G-2-1. The aircraft was retained at the factory as a test aircraft to test the various systems, including the rocket-assisted takeoff system, and to do flight and flutter clearance trials of various external load configurations, including the large wing fuel tanks requested by the South African Air Force. The second Buccaneer of the production line, number 412, was also retained at the factory for a while as a test aircraft and allocated a civil registration number G2-2. In the photos here is Buccaneer 411, during the ground testing of the rocket-assisted takeoff system in 1965. And in the second photo is Buccaneer 414 doing actual rocket-assisted takeoff from Waterkloof for the last time in 1976. This photo was taken by Louis Vosloo. While the Waterkloof runway was considered adequate for Buccaneer operations, it was decided that the rocket-assisted takeoff system, which consisted of two Bristol Siddeley 605 rocket engines that could generate a massive 3,600 kilogram thrust for 30 seconds, was to be installed in the SAAF Buccaneers. It provided an extra margin for safety for heavy takeoffs to attain the necessary airspeed in the climb or soon after takeoff. The system was, however, never used operationally and was, according to some people, a total waste of money. The system was phased out when the aircraft received a midlife upgrade from 1976 onwards. The Buccaneer deliveries and the 24 Squadron reformed. In the first photo, Commandant Bob Rogers and Major John Murphy, after delivering Buccaneer 413 at Lossiemouth on the 27th of May 1965. And in the second photo is the 24 Squadron Buccaneers inside the hangar at Lossiemouth in October 1965. The squadron commander, Commandant Bob Rogers, and Major Mike Miller started their conversion on the Buccaneer S Mark I in October 1964, while Major Jan van Logerenberg attended a weapons course at Portsmouth. In January 1965, they were joined by two navigators, Major John Murphy and Captain Theo de Minnick. In January 1965, the technical team was sent to Britain for training on the Buccaneer, the aircraft, systems, and the engines. Captains Pinar and Atterbeer attended a training course on the Buccaneer simulator at the manufacturer Redifon. 24 Squadron was officially reformed at the Royal Navy Air School Lossiemouth, and the first SAAF Buccaneer, tail number 413, was delivered to the squadron on the 27th of May 1965. After they completed their training on the simulator at the manufacturer in Grinstead, the other designated pilots and navigators joined the squadron in June 1965 to start their conversion onto the Buccaneer S Mark 50. The last of the 8 Buccaneers, tail number 419, was delivered to Lossiemouth on the 12th of October 1965. The delivery flight to South Africa from the 27th of October to the 3rd of November 1965. Here we see in the photo the 8 Buccaneers lined up at Lossiemouth on the 27th of October 1965. And the second photo was the second force ship overflying Lossiemouth and their route to Yeovilton. On the 27th of October, the Buccaneer departed Lossiemouth in 2 four-ship formations for the long delivery flight to South Africa. The first led by Commandant Bob Rogers, and the second formation was led by Major Mike Miller. The route they flew was first from Lossiemouth to Yeovilton, and the second from Yeovilton to Las Palmas, and the third from Las Palmas, where they had a 2-night stopover, to Sol Island for a refueling stop, and then to Ascension Island. The fourth was from Ascension Island to Luanda, and the last leg from Luanda to Waterkloof. The Buccaneer formation was supported by 5 28 Squadron C-130s along the route, carrying the ground support team and equipment, and 2 35 Squadron Shackletons were stationed at Bissau and Ascension Island for search and rescue duties should the need arise. Unfortunately, Buccaneer 417 went down on the 30th of October 1965 during the flying leg between Sol Island and Ascension Island. The aircraft suffered a high-speed stall followed by a double-engine flameout and entered an unrecoverable spin. The crew were forced to eject over the open ocean, and after a massive search and rescue effort, they were found and picked up by a Dutch passenger ship, the SS Randfontein, which diverted from its route to Cape Town to pick up the crew. The rest of the delivery flight was uneventful, and the 7 aircraft landed at Waterkloof on the 3rd November 1965, officially starting the Buccaneer era in the South African Air Force. The other 8 Buccaneers were delivered by sea in 2 batches in 1966. Unique features of the Buccaneer, which I want to highlight. In the photo, the first photo is 2 Buccaneers doing an in-flight refueling during an air show in 1980. And the second photo is a Buccaneer rolling the bomb door during an air show in 1991. The Buccaneer was the first aircraft on the SAAF's inventory to have an air-to-air refueling capability. They were equipped with a refueling probe on the nose just in front of the cockpit to take on fuel from another Buccaneer, configured as a tanker. As airborne tankers, the Buccaneer was fitted with an underwing drogue pod under the starboard wing and a 2,000-liter wing tank under the port wing to refuel other Buccaneers, and later also the Mirage F1AZ from 1976 onwards. For additional fuel, a 2,000-liter long-range tank could also be fitted inside the bomb bay. The rotating bomb door was probably the most unique feature of the Buccaneer that set it apart from all other fighters, bombers type aircraft. It could fly with a full bomb load in a clean configuration without the associated drag caused by external loads. Even with a full bomb load and the bomb bay rotated open, the drag was minimal. The 600 series midlife modification program in 1976. In the first photo, we see Buccaneer 418 in pre-upgrade and in the original delivery scheme. In the second photo, we see Buccaneer 414 in the final color scheme, and it was post-upgrade. Note the changes to the aircraft profile with the new bomb door housing the internal 2,000-liter fuel tank. Despite the weapon sanctions, 12 modification kits were ordered and allowed in terms of the service life part supply contract. This was a major upgrade program. The modification program 75 to receive the modification package returned to the squadron in January 1980. Some of the modifications included was the following: a new upgraded Mark V strike side computer replaced the old Mark III. The Blue Parrot radar in the nose was given better range and tracking capability. A new passive radar warning system was installed in the bullet fairings of the horizontal tailplane. The new bomb door with integrated 2,000-liter fuel tank was installed. New Mark VI rocket ejection seats were installed. A new antenna was fitted to the forward port fuselage, and a small set of vortex generator fins were fitted to the upper surfaces of the wings. The Lytton Tons D and Decca 72 Doppler navigation system modification. Another major modification was the replacement of the original Green Saturn navigation system that was on its last legs and simply not good enough to go to war with. The RAF Buccaneers already received an upgrade, but due to the arms sanctions, the same type of equipment could not be obtained. The Mirage F1AZ had a moving map display run by a Decca 72 Doppler. After 1 hour of flying, Decca was and asked if it would work on a Buccaneer. They confirmed it would, with minor wiring looms, but would require the new 10D computer. The first installation was done on Buccaneer 416, and it was successfully installed and tested. The only problem experienced was to shroud the Decca 72 unit with the original fiberglass fairing. Atlas was requested to design a proper frame to install the Decca 72 unit and to redesign the cover fairing. All the remaining aircraft were eventually fitted with the new system as they rotated through Atlas for their major services. And in the photo, the first photo is the Tons D computer that was fitted. And in the second photo was the cradle fitment that was designed by Atlas for the Decca 72 Doppler system. That was just after of the bomb bay in the backside of the aircraft. The border war operations. The Buccaneer introduction to the border war was in 1978 during Operation Reindeer. Following that operation, 24 Squadron and the Buccaneers were regular visitors to the operational area over the next 10 years to 1988. During this period, the squadron was involved in 35 cross-border war operations. They were regarded as an important factor in the balance of air power in Southern Africa and were utilized in the interdiction, close air support, photo reconnaissance, and electronic intelligence roles during external operations against base areas in Angola and Zambia. In the late 70s and the early 80s, the war escalated, and the South African Defence Force launched some large-scale operations in which the Buccaneer played a crucial role. Since fuel was not really an issue with the Buccaneer, it could attack enemy targets from various directions, carrying a full load and most of the time in total surprise. The Buccaneers had the ability to attack targets in Angola flying directly from Waterkloof and return to base, or alternatively landed at Grootfontein after the attack to refuel and then return home. At that stage, the South African Air Force had complete air superiority in the Angolan war theatre. Brigadier General Dick Lord said, the Buccaneer was perhaps the best aircraft in the South African Air Force arsenal in terms of an African war. It had two-man crew, could fly low and fast over great distances while carrying everything plus the kitchen sink, could attack the enemy targets from all directions by day and night, was used for all the most dangerous combat missions, and had the reputation for always being on time, on target. Yes, we see two paintings done by the aviation artist Reino Sillier of Buccaneers during attacks. And what I actually want to discuss is the early weapons capability that the Buccaneers had. Initially, the standard weapons carried by the Buccaneer was the big World War II type 1,000-pound bombs, of which 4 could be carried in the internal bomb bay and 4 under the wings, or alternatively 4 68mm forward firing rocket pods for a total load of 72 rockets under the wings, or a combination of 4 1,000-pound bombs internally and the 4 rocket pods on the wings. When the Buccaneer was introduced in the war in 1978, there were minimal resistance in the form of anti-aircraft defenses. With no real threat from the ground, the Buccaneer could freely roam the target areas and deliver its weapons in a dive attack profile. Buccaneer and the AeSSA guided missile operations. The AeSSA guided missile was the only standoff weapon available to be used on the Buccaneer at that stage. It was used operationally for the first time during Operation Protea in 1981, when the squadron was tasked to destroy 2 imported radar and missile sites during the opening attack. This was also the first time the Buccaneers carried a combination of AeSSA missiles and 460-kilogram bombs to attack multiple targets in one mission. The attacks were very effective and accurate. And the same missile bomb combination was also used with great accuracy in the attack on the Kangamba airfield in December 1983. These missions were exhilarating sorties demonstrating the value of the Buccaneer over long distances, carrying a combined weapons load to carry out multiple attacks during the same mission. During the launch and guidance phase of the AeSSA missile, the aircraft had to fly steady in a 20-degree dive for about 20 to 30 seconds in the direction of the target. It could only pull off the target once the missile hit the target. This put the aircraft within the strike range of the air defenses deployed in the target area. This was surely not an ideal situation. With more advanced anti-aircraft defense systems deployed by the Angolan forces, it soon became a reality that the launch profile for weapons such as the AeSSA missile, rockets and dive bomb profile became too dangerous, exposing the aircraft and the crew to anti-aircraft weapons such as the dangerous long-range SAM-2 and SAM-6 missiles. These missiles were, however, positioned at known fixed sites and could easily be avoided. On the other hand, the shoulder-launched infrared tracking SAM-7 missile was a completely different animal, since it could be deployed anywhere. Special tactics had to be implemented to avoid this missile. More and more modern equipment, in example, long-range radars, advanced mobile missile systems, in example, the SAM-9, which was a vehicle-mounted system carrying infrared-seeking missiles, and the radar-guided anti-aircraft artillery systems were deployed by the Angolan forces. To counter these threats, the Buccaneer were fitted with anti-radar chaff and anti-infrared flare pods, and the weapon's launch profile changed from dive attacks to toss attacks. This limited the aircraft's exposure to these threats to the shortest possible time. In reality, the forward-firing rockets and the AeSSA missile could thus no longer be used in such a threat area. This left the Buccaneer with the big 460 kilogram bombs as its only combat weapon and limited its attack capability. The big bombs were also not effective anymore. It made a big bang and a huge hole in the ground with minimal damage. Here we see a beautiful artist impression by aviation artist Reconnaissance G of two Buccaneers doing an initial point medium toss bomb attack. In other words, they pitched up from low level to toss their bombs to the target. Buccaneer 416 is already tossing its bomb load while releasing infrared flares, and the second Buccaneer 414 is still pitching, starting to release the flares. The active countermeasure system pod under the wing, that's the white under the wing, is at this stage already hard at work countering the Angolan radar air defense systems. The navigator will have the ACS pod, as it was known, pod set to automatic mode to lighten his workload. The chaff will also be released at pre-programmed intervals, but is invisible to the naked eye. It was actually amazing how well the Buccaneer handled under these conditions. The aircraft had a reputation of turning like a brick. This was true at 500 knots, but was not true at 380 knots, which was the typical speed at the top of the apex after the weapon release for the toss bombing. At this speed, the pilot could safely turn the aircraft at 5G without risking a nasty flick-in that the aircraft had a reputation for doing. The pilots on the squadron made use of the onset buffer. The buffer occurs when the aircraft is approaching the stall and is very predictable if you know what to look for, to be able to control the aircraft during these conditions. The Buccaneer, with his long range and two-man crew, was an excellent weapons delivery platform in the SAAF's inventory. But by 1984, it became clear for the SAAF to use the Buccaneer effectively as a strike aircraft. Some modifications had to be done. The biggest problem faced by 24 Squadron was to improve the operational bombing capability of the Buccaneer. The new generation of low-drag bombs developed in South Africa was cleared for use on the Buccaneer in a record time of 6 months during 1986. This included the design, production, and integration of the new multi-bomb carriers, of which 2 quadruple carriers could be carried in the bomb bay, giving the aircraft the ability to carry either 8 Mark 82 or Mark 81 bombs internally. Just to give you something on the Mark 82, the Mark 82 was a 250 kilogram bomb, and the Mark 81 was a lighter bomb of 125 kilograms. 2 triple bomb carriers could be carried under each wing, able to carry either 3 Mark 81s or 2 Mark 82s on each of those carriers. This was a huge improvement since the new generation bombs were far more effective than the old bombs, especially when they were fitted with airburst fuses. Now, an airburst fuse is fitted to the nose of the bomb, and as the bomb comes to the ground, maybe 3 or 4 meters above the ground, the bomb will explode without touching the ground. During operational deployment, the Buccaneers usually carried a mixture of airburst and sometimes delay fuse bombs. Delay fuse bombs actually went into the ground, and it just was there for a certain period of time, maybe an hour or maybe 36 hours, and then it would explode. So it will cause a lot of confusion amongst the enemy. During operational deployment, the Buccaneer usually carried a mixture of airburst and delay fuse. Considering that the stick of 10 Mark 82s, pre-fragmented with airburst, effectively covers an area of 250 by 1,000 meters in a toss attack, and that 4 aircraft covered an area of 1,000 meter by 1,000 meter. This became a really formidable area weapon in the 1987-88 conflict. The Buccaneer could thus carry 1 or 2 active countermeasure pods during the operational missions with loads of up to 12 Mark 82 or 14 Mark 81 bombs. For most of the FAPLA brigades had at least 4 surface-to-air 8 missiles and 4 surface-to-air 9 or 13 type missiles protecting them. To counter this threat, the use of extremely low-level flight at 540 knots at 80 feet on the run into the target was quite normal. This reduced the chances of the SAM-8 acquiring the aircraft prior to the pitch. Due to this threat, the SAAF extensively used the toss bomb launch profile. The standard medium toss profile of the Buccaneer had been modified to give the aircraft a better standoff range during the toss bomb launch. The pitch angle was increased to 42 degrees. This meant that the aircraft could now release the bomb load in the toss profile at 2,000 feet instead of the previous 1,000 feet, increasing the standoff range from 4 nautical miles to 4.5 nautical miles. The result of this was that the increase in standoff range kept the aircraft out of the SAM-8 range for long enough to carry out an attack and break off in relative safety, and significantly increase the efficiency of the Mark 81 and the Mark 82 bombs. To operate in a high-threat environment, the aircraft had to be equipped with more effective passive radar warning and active electronic countermeasure systems. To address this issue, the passive warning system was upgraded, and an active electronic countermeasure pod was sourced and introduced in service from 1985 onwards. With most of the building blocks available by the end of 1985, in example, active countermeasure systems, jamming pods, chaff, flare, and radar warning receivers, nothing was, however, integrated. Very little doctrine was defined, and these individual subsystems required considerable integration by the man in the loop, in example, the navigator. There was a lot of training and testing done in 1986 and early 1987. And by the time the major conflict started in September 87, the operating doctrine was well defined for these systems, and the Buccaneer crews were qualified to use these individual subsystems as an integrated countermeasure system, albeit with the navigator being the integrator. The need to train as you fight became more and more critical for the SAAF, and specifically for 24 Squadron. During 1986-87, they were varying their flying exercises and always ensured that they practiced as much low-level navigation and simulated attacks as possible. When transiting to the bombing range at Roodeval, a typical sortie would include at least an hour at low level at 480 knots in varied terrain from lowveld, bushveld, mountains, and even desert. During this phase, the crews would individually conduct simulated attacks against targets and then be required to rendezvous at a fixed point at a predetermined time. And according to the crew, beware if you were more than 2 seconds late, because then you had trouble. The formation would then transit to Roodeval and throw 8 practice bombs individually in a toss profile, and then transit back to Waterkloof at low level. The intention was to make this training as realistic as possible, which in my opinion really paid off when the real conflict started. As part of these exercises, they regularly operated without the use of inter-aircraft radio communications to ensure that they would not be picked up on any communications intelligence system and the enemy be warned of any incoming attacks. To execute a coordinated strike information without radio communication takes a considerable amount of planning, and briefing prior to the sorties, and all the aircraft must operate in the same brief manner to avoid confusion during the attack phase. Apart from the regular squadron training sorties, they conducted various joint exercises with other fighter squadrons and electronic warfare groupings. This was testimony of how serious the South African Air Force and the squadron took the impending threat in Angola. In the TOS bomb profile with an active countermeasure system pod fitted and full chaff and flare loads carried made the Buccaneer a very effective attack platform. The ACS pod was by mid-1997 further upgraded to counter the very dangerous mobile SAM-8 radar-guided missile system and the 4-barrel mobile radar-guided Shilka anti-aircraft gun system. It now had the ability to suppress any form of air defense missile or radar-guided air defense artillery system. The shaft consists of electronically conducting filaments, which are cut to form dipoles that are resonant to a particular wavelength, which is ejected in very small quantities in controlled bursts. There are generally enough dipoles in a shaft packet to provide a radar cross-section much greater than that required for break lock, provided that there is sufficient time for the chaff to bloom. The standard operating procedure would be to counter the SAM-8 radar should they transition into a track mode. One way to do this would be to start the shaft pattern 6 seconds prior to pitch for the toss attack to ensure that the SA-8 radar would struggle to transition to a tracking mode during the pitch up maneuver. The attack aircraft would then continue to deploy the chaff until the chaff was all used up, normally on the way out at low level. All these sorties were into areas that were heavily defended, and they were always met with a barrage of anti-aircraft fire and missiles. During Ops Modular, it was the first time that the South African Air Force had ever utilized such a comprehensive countermeasure package, and it certainly paid off handsomely. The long-range oblique photo capability. In the two pictures there is a Buccaneer flying with a long-range oblique photo pod in the bomb bay, and it's busy taking photos of Kuitu airfield, and in the second photo of the Kuitu bridge over the Kuitu River. Some Vicon 91 long-range oblique camera pods were acquired and integrated on the Buccaneer in 1984. This gave the Buccaneer a much-needed photo reconnaissance capability. The pod could take oblique photos of strategic targets at a stand-off distance of up to 30 kilometers from a fairly low level. There was thus no need for the aircraft to fly directly over the target area, exposing itself to any air defense systems deployed around the targets. The pod fitted in the Buccaneer's bomb bay, and the aircraft could thus fly in a clean configuration and carry 2 ACS pods on the wings. The target was approached from low level, with the aircraft pitching up for the photo run and plunged down to low level immediately after the photo run was finished. Depending on the size of the target, this normally took about a minute from the pitch to the plunge to complete the sortie or the photo run. Numerous such sorties were flown from 1984 to 1987 to take photos of, in example, the Menongui and Kuitu airfields, the Namibia airfield in southern western Angola to check for the presence of Su-25 attack aircraft, and the bridge over the Kuitu River. Now the H2 TV-guided bomb system. One of the aspects of the standoff weapons, the development of the H2 TV-guided bomb had been underway for many years since the early 1980s and was coming close to fruition as an operational weapon system. The system was finally qualified at Rimfastmark in February 1987. This was the first time that the South African Air Force became capable of delivering a pinpoint weapon at a standoff range of up to 60 kilometers. The H2 was a TV-guided 1,000 kilogram glide bomb and had two types of warheads. In example, the penetration warhead and the fragmentation warhead. The bomb was carried by the Buccaneer on a specially designed pylon supported by two struts to counter any flutter. The Buccaneer could carry two such bombs on the inner wing stations, and the H2's communication pod was carried on the outer wing pylon on the starboard wing, and the active countermeasure pod was carried on the port wing outer wing station. This gave the Buccaneer the much needed standoff capability. The full story of the H2 is covered in my book 4 that must still be published. Now the 6E Squadron Boeing 707 Eland tanker. I must make mention of the Boeing 707 which entered service in 1987. The Buccaneer to Buccaneer in-flight refueling had a limited operational ability because of the relatively insignificant amounts of fuel that could be transferred for operational utilization over the anticipated strike distances. With the introduction of the Boeing tanker, in-flight refueling with very promising operational application was becoming a reality for the South African Air Force. The Boeing 707 was a real force multiplier, as it could refuel 3 aircraft simultaneously and was also fitted with a very advanced electronic intelligence and communication intelligence system. For many of the attacks during Operation Modular in southern Angola, the air crews had the luxury of a 6E Squadron Boeing 707 with its excellent electronic warfare capability on standby to provide information of enemy radar that was on the air and that could constitute a threat to the attacking aircraft before, during, or after the attack. This was, of course, very reassuring for them and ensured that no unnecessary operational risks were taken. The electronic warfare capability of the Boeing 707 enabled them to gather top quality intelligence on many of the enemy's weapon systems, providing pinpoint accurate positioning, as well as the type of system to be expected during many of their sorties into enemy territory. Here we see the lead Buccaneer in a battle formation at low level over Angola. This was taken during Ops Modular. The South African Air Force played a very important and very successful part in supporting the ground forces during this campaign and deployed 12 Mirage F1AZs, which was later reduced to 4, and the 4 Buccaneers for the bombing phase of the operation. Together, they flew 176 strike sorties, strikes over a period of 191 days, during which the strike aircraft were deployed. The strikes were flown in the face of a very comprehensive air defense system that comprised of modern surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft artillery guns, and fighters like the MiG-23, supported by excellent radar cover of the area, and often was bombed from far out. The aircraft never attacked from the same direction twice, as the known Soviet doctrine is to always move the mobile air defense onto the last line of attack. The result of their work was not always readily apparent, except in the case of strikes flown against Fabla, a Fabla brigade, just before an attack by the ground forces. From the middle of November 1987, the role of 24 Squadron changed with the operational deployment of the H2 TV-guided bomb system. Here in the photo, we see a Buccaneer loaded with 2 H2 bombs, a communications pod, and the ACS pod with 24 squadron ground crew and Kentron personnel busy preparing the aircraft for a mission. Buccaneer H2 Operation Hooper. The planning for the next phase, Ops Hooper, included that the SAAF was to deny FAPLA their crossing of the Kuitu Bridge as soon as possible. After discussion between Army and SAAF planners, it was decided that the SAAF should destroy the Kuitu Bridge with the H2 bomb. 24 Squadron was tasked to move over to H2 operations, focusing on more strategic targets with the Buccaneers. The attack was to be carried out as soon as possible, both for operational reasons and to avoid the bad weather of the approaching rainy season. Destroying the bridge would cut off the FAPLA forces east of the Kuitu Bridge from the rest of the 6th military region, which would seriously impede efforts to reinforce them and would further complicate their resupply. Following soon after the losses inflicted by the SAAF on a recent convoy from Menongui, the loss of the bridge would also be a further blow to their morale. Keep in mind that this bridge was the only access across the river from Menongui in southwestern Angola from more than 100 kilometers to the north and 200 kilometers to the south, and was the only way for the FAPLA to resupply troops on the eastern side of the river and allow for a retreat to Kuitu Konaval across the river. In this photo, the ground crew members busy loading and preparing the Buccaneers for the first operational H2 attack on the 25th of November 1987. Here we see an artist impression, the first one, done by Reconnaissance of the 2 Buccaneers armed with H2 bombs, escorted by 3 1-squadron Mirage F1 AZs on their way to attack the bridge over the Kuitu River. And the second one is an artist impression also done by Reino of the lead Buccaneer launching the H2 bomb at a height of 35,000 feet. With the bomb stable and the wings deployed correctly, the guidance phase began. And I'll give you now a description of the actual attack. On the 3rd of January, 2 Buccaneers took off from Grootfontein at 20 to 12. The lead Buccaneer was fitted with 2 H2 and the standby number 2 Buccaneer carried 1. They were escorted by 3 Mirage F1 AZs. It was nice to have company that could shoot back. They were intercepted. When they flew over Mavinga en route to the pitch up point, they noticed that cumulus clouds were forming towards the target area. All the H2s checked out as functional. At the pitch up point, the leader started to climb and decided to continue to launch to the launch point before making the decision to launch or abort the attack. The clouds had built up to about 5/8 cover, and although it was more than the prescribed maximum allowed, they could see the target clearly and thus decided to launch the weapon. It was in great disbelief when the backup aircraft noticed that the lead aircraft had launched the weapon regardless of the cloud cover. The launch aircraft turned southeast and slowly descended while the navigator controlled the weapon. The weapon flew over some clouds which obscured the ground, but the navigator stuck to his task and controlled the weapon excellently through the navigation phase. The auto tracking on the bridge was not good, and the weapon controller had to take over several times to stabilize the auto tracker and lock onto the target. The weapon detonated effectively on the bridge. During the guidance phase of the bomb, some mix were again reported. As soon as the weapon controller called impact, the pilot rolled the aircraft inverted into a very steep dive and pushed the speed up to the maximum the Buccaneer could do, leveling off just above treetop level and turning south for Grootfontein. In the meantime, the 2 South African Defence Force Special Forces teams deployed near the bridge confirmed that the weapon hit the bridge on the southern side and destroyed the section of the bridge. There was one more attempt to try and destroy the bridge in February 1988. But that was not successful due to a technical glitch in the final guidance phase of the bomb. The Buccaneer returned to Waterkloof the same day. That brought an end to the Buccaneers' involvement in the border war. I actually want to play a video clip of the actual footage from the bomb camera during that attack on the bridge.
Okay, brug begin uitkom. Daar is 'n wolk voor. En laat ook de kwaad druk. Dit die brug. Daar is iets op die brug. Dit is 'n voertuig.
Hoe grade kyk wat jy kyk?
30. Daar is weer 'n wolk in die pad. Was regtig 'n voertuig op die brug of iets?
Ek loop by bly dan.
Hey, hou die lok.
Die wolk weg?
Wolk is weg. Hij is anders op die brug.
Nou, dat
Aan die band.
de first global.
Wat is ons hoogte nou?
Okay, Charlie, global.
12-0. Oké, hij gaat voor mij, hij is aangesluit. Holding lock. Terug uit. En net links. Ik denk dat is in die water net.
In this photo, the damage on the bridge can clearly be seen. The Cubans did attempt to effect a repair to the bridge in the ensuing weeks, but to the best of knowledge, the repair could not handle heavy vehicles such as tanks and armored troop carriers. FAPLA was compelled to use bridging equipment and pontoon ferries after this attack. The SAAF had finally entered the era of deploying pinpoint standoff weapons in combat. I want to play another video clip where Brigadier General Dick Lord, former commander of the 310 SAAF command post at Oshakati, and Colonel Neil Napier, former Buccaneer navigator who actually successfully guided the H-2 bomb that damaged the Kuito Bridge on the 3rd of January 1980.
The SAAF made a further attempt to destroy the Kuito Bridge.
We tried to take it out with a guided bomb which we'd built, a South African developed guided bomb. It was a TV guided bomb. It was a large bomb. It fitted under the pylon of a Buccaneer. This bomb had, on the shape of it, it had 2 wings, which once it was dropped, these wings came out to form in a normal flying wings, and this thing could then glide.
It had a camera in the nose of the bomb and controls in the aircraft by which the navigator could control it towards the target. It would fly for about 5 to 6 minutes at maximum range towards its target, and approximately 20 to 25 seconds from the target it would enter a dive, a 45-degree angle dive, and pick up speed, reaching a speed of between Mach 0.88 and Mach 0.92, and then home in on the target and detonate either above the ground, depending on the type of fusing that was applied to this particular bomb, or penetrate the target. There was heavy cloud at the time, and the camera was not performing exactly as it should, but we had to continue the mission after the weapon had been released. Shortly before it impacted, we received a call that the MiGs were on their way to intercept us. The weapon impacted and destroyed a section of the bridge. We turned left towards home, made a very rapid descent, and continued and landed safely. Then, as a souvenir, on the aircraft, I was handed this component by the ground crew. It is a coupling that is coupled to the bomb, through which the fusing wire is connected to the bomb, and this remains behind, and I have kept it ever since.
This also of Buccaneer 414, flown by Clive Pienaar and Russell Ellis during a special final photo shoot sortie at Reconnaissance a week before the final Buccaneer flight in 1991, was taken by the famed aviation photographer Herman Potgieter. The Buccaneer is starting to climb, with vapor forming above the wings as the load increases, and the wingtips cutting through the air is clearly visible. A senior officer of the Angolan Air Force interviewed after the war ended said that the Buccaneer was a real thorn in their side. It attacked their forces day and night, and most of the time in complete surprise. This is actually a wonderful testimony of how effective the Buccaneer really was, and what a valuable asset it was in the South African Air Force inventory. Sadly, 20 lost 11 of the 16 Buccaneers delivered through the 26 years of service. None of those losses could be attributed to the Buccaneer. Apart from 2, I studied all the other loss reports. In almost all of them, it was pure bad luck. The loss of life was very sad, and the squadron will always remember those who lost their lives. Lieutenant General Jan van Lochenberg, former Buccaneer pilot and chief, wrote the following for my final Buccaneer book. How do I remember the Buccaneer? What a privileged lot we were. It is now more years than I care since my last flight in a Buccaneer in 1991. Yet there are still times when my thoughts turn to the thrill of so many flights in great aircraft. A few months before the last flight, fate decreed that I had to decide on the future of the Buccaneers in the South African Air Force. The Bush War was behind us, and the defense budget was being pruned. Our Air Force simply had to downsize, and hard logic argued that the Bucks had to come to the end of their distinguished career in the South African skies. What a great airframe and engine combination it was. The great distances of South Africa were never kind to the likes of Vampires and Sabres and even Mirages. Flying from Cape Town to Pretoria or vice versa was always a matter of praying for good weather at the destination. Diversion airfields were few and far between, and landing aids were mostly of a rudimentary nature. A decision to divert had to be made in good time. But the Buccaneers scoffed at these and could easily fly from one end of the country to the other, and with sufficient fuel to divert almost everywhere. There's a little bit of an exaggeration. And then, of course, there was the luxury of in-flight refueling, extended its magical radius of action even further. Add to all this, the sight of a Mirage reduced to impotence, having carried out a near-perfect intercept, but ending up perhaps a kilometer astern, at low level and unable to close the gap. It is a pity that the Buccaneer arrived on the scene before the advent of modern electronics. Although its radar was regarded as something out of this world by aircrew that could not compare it with anything else, hindsight now tells us that it was very primitive indeed. At the time, however, we were fascinated by its ability to pick up ships at sea and lead us unerringly to an unsuspected target many miles away. But the greatest thrill of all was, of course, getting down to 50 feet and to experience the surge of power as the great aircraft accelerated willingly, like a headstrong horse given the reins, to 580 knots. The long toss maneuver which followed the descent to sea level again, and then eventually the flight back to Waterkloof, during which the radar enabled us to thread our way between the towering cumulus nimbus clouds building up along the escarpment, will forever be part of the memories of every Buccaneer pilot and navigator who participated in these exercises. 24 Squadron's unofficial motto, "Hit the floor, it's 24," says something about the spirit of the crews who were fortunate to be associated with such a great aircraft. The last official Buccaneer flight took place on the 28th of March 1991, and the squadron finally closed at the end of June 1991. I just want to read you the following statement. For those of you who know how important rugby is to South Africans and the rivalry between teams, a retired general and former Buccaneer navigator said that, and I quote, 24 Squadron and the Buccaneers were the blue bulls of the South African Air Force. I would like to thank the former 24 Squadron members who made contributions for the Buccaneer book series from which this presentation was compiled. I also want to thank Reconnaissance who used his maestro talent to do all the awesome paintings I requested for the book series. With no photos available, he really did an excellent job to capture the Buccaneer in action. I thank you for the interest and listening to the presentation, and I hope you enjoy it. I've just got one more slide that I want to share. And I just want to say something about the book series. In the photo is the 4 books that's already been published. In front is the book, The Pirates of 24 Squadron, which was a photo tribute book to all 16 Buccaneers that served as photos. The standing books from left to right is book 1, The Beginning, which covered the story from where it all started until the fit at Waterkloof, as well as some other informative information. Book 2 covers the first 10 years of service of the Buccaneer operations at 24 Squadron from 1966 to 1975. And Book 3, The New Era, which cover Buccaneer, including the operations the Buccaneer was involved in during this period. Book 4, which still need to be published, the final phase, which has not been published yet, cover Buccaneer operations from 1985 to 1991, when the Buccaneer was phased out. The 4-part book series are text-rich books with lots of detail, in-service photos, and contributions received from former Buccaneer members, or 24 Squadron members, sharing some of their experience while flying the Buccaneer in training combat operations. All the logistics for the book, in example, the printing, selling, and dispatch is handled by Johan Conradie through the 24 Squadron Buccaneer NPC, non-profit company. The proceeds of the book sales contribute to the preservation of the 5 Buccaneer survivors at the various museums where they are on display. And that is it then.
Well, this is just a fantastic presentation, and we just thank you for that. And I see that the questions are pouring in, so
okay. Kevin, sorry, do I need to stop my share on this side now?
I think we can leave it up, or you can stop if you want to.
Can I leave the slide on it? Can I leave the slide on at the moment? That's displaying now, or must I take it off?
I think leave it up, and then people can see how to audio books. Okay.
Fine. Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that. It's really been great. So I think let's dive into the questions, and then we can end off with the thanks. So please, people, use the Q&A tab if you can, because if the questions are in between the chats, it's a bit difficult for me to keep track. So the first question I see in the Q&A tab is from Richard Brown, and he says, fascinating presentation. Thank you, Johan. Given that the Blue Parrot radar was designed for intercepting Russian cruisers, how was it used or adapted in the context of the border war over dry land?
They did use in bombing operations. They did use it as what they call a locked on a radar locked on bombing, toss bombing. But how specifically it worked, I won't be able to give that information. Maybe if Richard can drop me an email, then I can correspond with him on that. But it was used.
Okay. I'm going to just pick up something from the questions and from the chat. Some of the questions are there. So from Kevin Gopal, and he asked, where are all the surviving airframes today? One or two at the SAAF Museum and one at the Air Force Base Waterkloof. Where else? Okay,
the 5 survivors, one is at Cape Town, Buccaneer 416, and that's actually subject now to a restoration project run by Jonathan Durant and his dedicated team. The restoration is in a fairly advanced stage, and if it were not for the COVID restrictions, they most probably would have been completed by now. Then Buccaneer 421 is at Swartkops. It's also subject to a restoration, but that was hindered by the COVID restrictions. And then Buccaneer 414 is actually on display at the Swartkops Museum. And then Buccaneer 412 is mounted at Waterkloof Air Force Base. And then Buccaneer 422 is at the National Historical Museum, Military Museum at Saxonwold. That's on display.
Yeah, I really know your sale numbers. Okay, and just another question from the chat side from Richard Macaulay. He said, great presentation, thank you. The SAAF definitely chose the right aircraft, but were there any other aircraft that were considered at the time?
As far as I know, they did look at the A6 Intruder, but that wasn't possible to obtain that aircraft. I think they maybe just give it some consideration, but since they had good relationships with the the UK at that time, and due to the Simonstown agreement that was in place, they could easily obtain these aircraft. And at that time, the Blackburn aircraft really wanted to sell the Buccaneer to South Africa. I mean, it would have made them easier to export to other countries, which actually never happened. South Africa was the only foreign country to actually buy the Buccaneer, and then we were denied to obtain 16 additional aircraft. I know that that in 1971, when Mr. Edward Heath came to power with his conservative government, there were huge discussions to actually, they were willing to sell us that additional 16 Buccaneers, but unfortunately, before that could happen, Mr. Wilson came back to power and that was cancelled.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so we've got a question from Eagle Glacial. Fantastic presentation. Why does the Buccaneer have that curious long feature at the rear of the empennage with a long dorsal strake and short ventral strakes? What are the strakes for?
Was that now at the tail section, or I don't actually understand what he's referring to?
The rear of the empennage. Okay, basically at the tail. So I think it's that, that feature on the air brake.
Yes, I think. The Buccaneer had a unique feature. I didn't cover that because I had to sort of cut down to stay in the time. The Buccaneer had quite a unique feature in the fact that it had a split tail brake, and that long tail was actually the brake because that opened to both sides as wide as a barn door, and it was very effective as an air brake. And the Buccaneer could, even if it was intercepted by a Mirage or whatever, it just rolled over and it opened that barn door brakes and it went down straight at whatever speed and then go to low level and just close up that brakes and it escaped the intercept. That was very effective.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, there's a question from Hendrik Rodemeyer. How much did the Buccaneer cost in 1965? Are the other statistics in Johan's book, like the prices of ammo and upgrades? This is a very technical question there.
No, that's fine. I mean, the Buccaneer cost, the total order was 44 million rand. A Buccaneer cost about 2.5 million rand per aircraft. That was the cost in 1965 or when it was ordered. The upgrade package in 1976, as far as I can remember, that was just below 3 million rand. The cost to upgrade those to that 600 series modifications, to install them on a Buccaneer, that was about 3 million rand. And from the loss report in 1982, when Buccaneer 413 was lost in a ground incident, as far as I can remember, the total loss or the loss value of the Buccaneer at that stage was 18.5 million rand.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we just have a comment from Robert Scott, who said that he had a great pleasure of flying this magnificent aircraft in the Fleet Air Arm and had many happy memories. I would like to thank you for a fascinating insight into the service of the Buccaneer in the SAAF service, in which some of my former FAA colleagues served, including an old friend, Dickie Lord. And that's a comment from Robert Scott. And Stuart Fee says, thank you, riveting presentation. I flew the C-130B for the final photo shoot. And Ian Wagstaff said that it just brings back great memories of good operational times in the SAAF. And okay, so I think that's all the questions that are in front of us. So I think that brings the presentation to an end. And on behalf of the Aeronautical side of South Africa, we really just thank you for this presentation, for the obvious effort that you have put into this this presentation, just a fantastic engaging style and technical detail that you have dived into for us engineers in particular. And really the books are well worth reading. I can attest to that myself and recommend it. And so we just give you a warm hand of applause, virtual applause for a magnificent job. Well done.
Thank you very much. Kevin, a last comment from my side. I believe this presentation was recorded, and I think you mentioned that you will put it out on your website. If people maybe missed it, they can actually go and watch it there.
Yeah.
Do you know when it will be available?
We will ask you. Yes, we will ask you for your video, because that one segment with Neil Napier and want to recall, and unfortunately we didn't have sound for that, so we'll just ask you for that video, and we'll splice it into our recording, and we'll put it on the website. So everybody can look out for that, and we'll upload it shortly.
Johan, if you've got time for one more question, there's one that Biko posted and I think we missed.
Yeah, sure.
It is, what was the integration cost for the H2 Raptor into the Buccaneer, and how difficult was it?
It was quite a long process to actually get the bomb developed. It started off in the early 80s, and I mean they had to design and develop it from scratch. And it wasn't just a bomb. I mean, they had to develop the warheads that was fitted into the bomb. And also they had to develop a special pylon for the Buccaneer to carry the bomb under its wing, because that bomb was quite heavy. I mean, it's basically 1,000 kilograms, and it was a big bomb. And I think in all, the whole project, as far as I know, was in a region of 1 billion rand. And that in those days, it's quite a lot of money. Because they had to also build a simulator for the crew to be, that they can sort of test fly. And there was also 3 Impalas converted as H2 air trainers that was used by 24 Squadron, whereby the back cockpit was converted to look like the cockpit in the behind section of a Buccaneer, with all the controls and whatever in there. And the pilot had a guidance, a little guidance screen before him. So he flew as the navigator in the back seat directed him. And then under the Impala's wing was a special camera pod that looked the same as the camera on the bomb. So that's how they actually practiced the guidance of the bomb until the time when the bomb sort of locked onto the target and dived down, because the Impala couldn't do that, otherwise we would have lost it. So then they just turned away. But in 1985, the last qualifications were done on the project. And then early in 1986, the actual whole system was then transferred over to 24 Squadron, where they started integrating this on the in the squadron's combat systems. And the crew could sort of now start training on the simulator in the Buccaneer, and also do live firings at Rimfasterbak in near Uppington. But the Buccaneer was part of this this bomb project from the outset. From about 1981-82, the Buccaneer was involved.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, the H2 was pretty much the first South African standoff weapon project. I think that there was an earlier attempt, but this was the first one that reached operational status. So it was a big milestone in the South African missile industry as well.
Kevin, are you seeing Darren's question on the Q&A?
Darren's question. Okay. Yeah. So Darren asked, what happened to those Impalas? Were any of them and their cockpits preserved?
No, unfortunately, I just know that the one with the tail number 555, he ended up in Hoedspruit. And I think the other two, I think the one was 611 and 564. They returned to service after the Buccaneer Squadron 24 disbanded. What happened to them, I don't know. They might have ended up at a scrap heap somewhere or preserved somewhere. I don't know that.
Kevin, I don't see any more questions. I just want to, again, for one last time, remind everybody your display name on Zoom. We use a download to send it through to AeSSA. So if you need to qualify for CPD points, please make sure that your display name is we can know who you are. Otherwise, it's a little bit difficult for you guys to be able to register for CPD points.
Okay, thank you for that, Marie. And yeah, and again, we just appreciate your presentation and for your preparation. And if anybody wants to learn more about the Buccaneers, these books are incredibly detailed. They're really worthwhile, and you can order them as you can see them on the screen. So, and on that note, I think we can bring the proceedings to an end. And we thank you all for your attendance and for your obvious interest. This presentation was the best attended webinar in our history. So, Johan, congratulations on a new record for us.
Thank you very much.
And for everybody for making this a record. So, thank you, everybody, and good night.